That was so slickly done, the way I just dragged us all in there one by one. Honestly, it's like television production. No one would know. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Intertwingularity. I am Timo.
I'm Andy.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Simon.
Those pauses are getting longer.
They are.
Dramatic pauses.
I'm sure we can fix this in post. How is everyone? Has everybody got a sort of headline for how they are as we meet now?
I've got a goodie. I've just come from holiday from the Canary Islands and volcanoes. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling real good.
Any eruptions?
In my head, or just always in my head. Andy, no. I stood next to the
off camera. Let's hope.
I stood next to the 2021 volcano that erupted on La Palma. So yeah, I mean, 3 years ago it wiped out 2,000 buildings. No one hurt, but the lava field stood next to that, still smoking a wee bit. Whew, that was amazing. Nice to get in touch with nature and the reality of the world we stand on.
Wonderful.
Seen any telescopes? You're in La Palma.
Oh, honestly, we were on a little tour on a bus. If I could have paid an extra 50 euros to go up to the top, I'm going back. I'm definitely going back. There are telescopes and you can go up and see them.
I'd have jumped out the bus, even if it was moving. You'd never see me again.
It's a long way away. Old man of the woods.
Well, that sounds marvellous. And in fact, igneous. I can't think of a joke about the word igneous, but I like the word igneous.
It's a goodie. Anybody else feeling magnificent?
Metamorphic?
I love how, before recording, it's all hashtag shoot the gold. And then as soon as we're recording, magma. Simon, how are you?
Yeah, as I say, it's Wednesday. It's halfway through the week. So, I'm teetering. Which way, in which direction, I couldn't say. But I'm here. And we're recording. Oh, my God. I'm in the presence of my
Genius.
Friendship royalty. So, it's all
this
good.
is friendship royalty, right? This is what it takes to get all four of us in a virtual room. Lovely to have you back here. And I'm going to swing to my partner, Mr. Andy Robinson, who I believe has this week's theme, Enter Jingle from the Future, that I'll do one day right here. Andy.
Well, this week's theme has been some time in the coming, because we were actually supposed to be broadcasting about a month ago in time for the Oscars. So we're well ahead for next year's Oscars. So
do you want our predictions?
That would be pretty amazing, actually.
Sorry.
Best picture? No?
Best picture. It's going to be one called Wango. It's just the name. Don't know what it's about. Andy, what's Wango about?
It's best I don't say, really.
Exactly. That's why it wins.
I think Oppenheimer will probably win again, actually, because they'll just decide. Well, it cleaned up last month. Let's just hand over. We've got a few Oscars left over that we didn't hand out for categories we haven't invented yet. So let's just hand it to them. So
Oppenheimer 2.
This time it's come on, Bray. This is a gift. He's handed you a gift here. This time it's what? This time
he's thermonuclear.
This time it's rationing.
Oh God, there are so many subatomic references here. There are like astrophysicists sitting here on the sofa going, "It's right there! It's right there!" But I can't see what it is. My brain has turned to mush.
I think All of Us Strangers will sweep up next year, because it didn't win anything this year, which is
that was really
crime.
That was really sad. Yeah. Well, we can talk about this in a bit, because you and I went to see it a few weeks back, didn't we? So really, very moving film. So yes, in the spirit of the Oscars, we have decided to make this episode all about film, Celluloid Dreams, our personal experiences of being in that darkened room with the silver screen, and films that we've perhaps worked on. We've all worked on stuff before, and just to explore what cinema and film means to us. I think it's such an intrinsic part of film or culture, artistic culture in general. And I know for us Intertwingularity people, it crosses a lot of areas that we're interested in. So hopefully that might be of some interest to our listener.
Yes, for our listener is always interested.
Our listener is Lee's mum, who actually has probably given us the best and probably the only 4-star review that we'll get.
Oh yeah, what was it again?
Lee?
It was
Wasn't it?
was a wonderful review, wasn't it? And enough to kind of pack up and say, well, we did what we came here to do.
Yeah.
I think it was something along the lines of, I didn't fall asleep.
To be fair, that's probably the best review I can give anything these days. So.
And that's from your mum. So I mean, I think we're in good hands there, aren't we?
Oh yeah, it was a 4-star review, not 5. Did you see that?
Oh, she's leaving us room to improve.
Room to improve. Thanks, Lee's mum. Yes.
I think it actually was that she woke in the middle. She woke in the middle of the night, and then I think she wrote on Facebook that she started to watch our podcast and didn't fall back asleep. So that was it. That our podcast couldn't make your mum fall back asleep after having woken up in the middle of the night.
That's powerful. Those are powerful words.
That's great. Anti-insomnia.
I think that's Teflon. I will take, her matriarchal wisdom. I shall take with me
to the grave.
To the grave. Indeed. So you're right. Filmmaking, storytelling generally is our bag, right? All of us have spent our lives dithering about trying to tell stories in different ways. At some point, it's always got visual, but this time it's visual. But we're also men of the different media and understand how all these components do that. The magic of cinema is that it pulls together all the arts, right?
And it does. It's not just all the arts. There's a lot of grafting involved as well, and that grafting combines with the artistic, personalities on set, directors, etc., and that all of that comes together. And that's the powerful thing about films, isn't it? And the arts and things like that, especially films. I mean, if you're going to be a builder, you build, but you can be a builder on a film set and be involved in something creative and artistic and bring it to life. So it pulls in everything, language, it crosses boundaries across the world. There's animation, there's artistic, endeavors of all kinds. So it's a very, very powerful medium, and we're all really in love with it, aren't we?
Oh yes, it's definitely a drug.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask you all why you like it so much? Why do we like cinema? What is it that made us fall in love with this medium? It's like silence for 10 minutes.
He's coming with
a big question. It's a big question. I mean, it's that long form, differing from television in as much as it's a long form medium of 1.5 to 2 hours. Are we all agreed that's kind of the right length for a film?
Yeah.
Anything more is a bit of a push.
Lord of the Rings, I can live with that.
Yeah. But there's few and far between. But it's that journey, isn't it? I mean, that immersion. We don't get into the cinema as much as we used to, but that was always a thing in itself, wasn't it? I mean, it's one step away from a theatrical show, so it became an event in much the same way. And maybe that's something we need to get back to in some way. But certainly watching a film is an event in my house because, I hardly ever get control of the television. So I make sure that is an event, and it's it's the right blankets, and it's the right nibbles, and it's the right drink, and it's the right film.
So you're doing what we all did growing up, going to the cinema then, where you get your popcorn, your hot dog, it's an event, right? You go in and you sit down and you watch it. And I'm not entirely sure, because we must have seen lots of terrible movies as kids or teenagers, but I don't remember any terrible movies, even though they probably some of them weren't that great. Cat from Outer Space wasn't a good film, but to me as a kid, it was like one of the best things I'd ever seen.
Hold on.
Because it was an event.
Cat from Outer Space. Somebody find us that. That sounds excellent.
It's not.
I've got a Cat from Outer Space story, actually, which was that I had an absolute hissy fit because I wanted to watch Captain Caveman, and I had a hissy fit because it was on at the same time, and I refused to go, and it ended up with my mum staying at home with me so I could watch Captain Caveman, while my dad and my sister went to see the Cat from Outer Space.
Wow, you missed something there.
How do you think about that now?
I've seen Cat from Outer Space since, and I'm indifferent.
Oh, damned with faint praise. Indifferent. That's the worst possible creative.
I mean, Captain Caveman's pretty awful as well. Most Hanna-Barbera is not as good as we remember it, is it?
Cavey wavy.
It's massively formulaic, isn't it? But as kids, you don't see that.
It's no 1 million years BC, is it?
No, it's not. But those are the sorts of things we saw at cinemas, right? I mean, we're probably all of a similar age. So, what sort of films did you go and see, Andy, Timo? What sort of thing kind of blew your mind? Apart from Star Wars, which is an obvious one, but did you find it an event, or was it just something you always did all the time?
It was, yeah. You want to go first?
Well, I was just going to say it was. There's something about surrendering to that experience. It's an experience and it's an event, as you say, Simon, and how keen we are to surrender to that ceremony, and immerse ourselves and completely let go of interaction. Whenever we talk about an interactive story now, I just think, that sounds like work. I just want to be carried off somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, film just mimics the human condition so closely. But it also has something of dreams about it. I mean, it's fantastical because it's life, but, if you've gone to the cinema, it's life that's like 60 feet across and, 25 feet high. And so everything is bigger and bolder and, louder than real life really is. And it's just so easy to get caught up in, what's been served up on the screen. I remember reading something that Steven Spielberg said about the first time that he went to see his first film, and it's actually detailed in his latest film, his autobiographical film, The Fabelmans. And so he was only, I don't know, something like 4 or 5 years old, and his parents went to took him to see The Greatest Show on Earth, which is the Cecil B. DeMille film about the traveling circus, and it's got Charlton Heston as the owner of the circus, and Jimmy Stewart's in it, and a lot of big names. And Spielberg talks about how he was initially really hyped to go and see this thing because his dad had been talking about it in the days before they went to the cinema, and his dad said, "Oh, you're going to see elephants and you're going to see tigers and clowns and all sorts of things," and he thought that he was going to be taken to an actual circus. And as Spielberg tells it, for the first minute or two, he was incredibly upset because his dad had kind of betrayed him, and there weren't elephants and there weren't tigers, and there was just this screen, and then as soon as the film started, and he just got immersed into it, and everything was larger than life, and he soon forgot that this wasn't actually a real thing. It felt like the real thing. And at the end of the film, there is this massive train wreck where the train that has all of the the stuff that the traveling circus take with them collides with this car that's on the rail track, and they did it through miniatures and models and stuff. But to a kid who'd never seen a movie before, this looked incredible. And in The Fabelmans, you'll see him use his model train set at home to try and recreate this incredible crash that you see at the end of the film. And that obviously for him was the start of his lifelong love affair, not just watching films but making films. And I think it might have been similar for me. I mean, a seminal film was Star Wars for me, but I went to see other films before that. My mum tells me that she took me to see, of all films, The Towering Inferno, which I think was 1974, so I would have been about 6, which I think for a 6-year-old is pretty heavy going, actually. I don't think they were very hot on film certification back then, so as long as you were with your mum and dad, you could go and see anything basically. So this is before the whole PG,
the 1970s, ladies and gentlemen.
Scarred for life. Luckily I don't actually remember seeing the film, so I've only got my mum's words that we actually went. Another film that she took me to see was The Sting, Redford and Newman.
Yeah.
And I would have I remember seeing years, like decades later, seeing The Sting, and it's all about confidence tricksters with a plot that's so torturous that I didn't understand it as an adult. And I'm thinking, I must have just been munching my bag of popcorn during that one. I think it was 70s pacifier for kids. If you didn't have a TV handy, you just dragged your kids to the local cinema because it was pretty cheap.
Take them to see The Exorcist.
Thankfully, I don't think she took me to see that. No.
You need to be a bit careful, Andy, if you ever go into like hypnotic therapy or anything like that. You might come out of it completely remembering the whole of the Towering Inferno. You might have blocked.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. Well, I mean,
you can't remember any of it.
I know. I obviously buried it. Yes, it was too traumatic. I know the film now. I've seen it loads of times since. But
this is the thing.
I'd like to forget it.
The Spielberg experience, where he then recreates the thing immediately. He works it out and he recreates it with the camera and the little dolls and stuff. And he works on it, works on it, and then suddenly he's recreated something that was fantastical up on the screen, and the realization of like, I can do this. And he has a love affair with the cinema. We all do, but also all creatives, like Timo mentioned. Now we're obviously, we've seen thousands of films and thousands of ways to make films and been in our own films. And does that kill any of it for us? Can you still lose yourself in a film at the cinema?
Personally, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be awful if, having learned about the mechanics of films and how they're put together, if I ended up going to a cinema and couldn't enjoy it because, well, I knew how they made it. That would be terrible. But that's not happened to me. I don't know if it's ever happened to other people involved in filmmaking, but
I think when I first started studying English, and you start breaking down a novel, and it's really hard for a couple of years after that to read a novel, because all you're ever doing is looking for your metaphors and your similes and your meter and rhyme and all this, and it takes a while to get back into just enjoying it. But that's what I was kind of asking, is that when I watched Dune recently, it's one of the first films in ages where I didn't think at all about the fact that this was a film. I was so immersed in it, I'd forgotten I was there in the cinema. That was quite an incredible experience.
It's close to that, isn't it? I think there's this technique that Villeneuve brings this beautiful quality, and this idea that he can do the best job I've seen of just about making a really pompous idea stick close to the narrative, i.e. character and being in the moment. He can draw these big canvases and just about keep you keyed in and it not become all concept and style over moment, which is really that's what locks you in. It's the it's the personal emotional connection to a moment, and
Yeah.
how to create something grand that is also personal. You know, in that sense, I think the original Blade Runner is better at that than Villeneuve's follow-up, though it does try to do something very deliberate and is beautiful and does work. There's something about Blade Runner that is in that, you know, new golden age of movie making, when we were lucky enough to be kids, the late 70s and early 80s, that made a load of sort of perfect films that are really character popping but epic at the same time,
and high concept stuff whereby they had a little bit more technology to pull things off. You know, crazy things like Predator, Aliens, Highlander, you know, all really interesting, cracking ideas that haven't really gone away and keep getting remade. So
Yes.
we were in an interesting time. I don't know whether we're having, I mean, I know it's probably a bit of a golden age of cinema again. We're quite lucky with some of the things that come out. Poor Things, for example. But are those concepts still there? I mean, you know, we could come out with a concept now, right? You could say about 4 different words and that'll make a film. But the concepts are quite tricky, I think. Is the execution of it may be not so difficult, but the idea, the heart of the idea, plus dialogue, plus
it's that
personality and
I've
character.
always felt that every single film that exists is a kind of miracle, because it's so many arts in one, and the director's got to make sure that every single component, second, and craft of it all exists purely to serve that one single idea. And that's, to me, that's the central idea of art or successful production creatively, is that whatever it is, a building or a piece of design of other kind, it's clearly single-minded. It's the one idea. You know, I call it the napkin, don't I? It's what was the napkin for this? You can see what it was. The single idea that drove everything else. And the most successful productions, I think, get everybody behind it in a really single language. Even though then it can and must be rich, and you want to go off and explore it. It all feels like it fits together like a ooh. That's so hard to get that right.
We suddenly all meet there, don't we? Because we're all napkin people, if that's a word, a description. But you know, like you say, you all have an idea. A concept will come to me. I blurred it on the page really quickly, and it's like blah, 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 blah. Simon knows that. And then Simon's really good at the graphic design. I mean, he said a couple of words earlier that just brought a joke together perfectly. I think it was nude scientist. Anyway, we'll let you think about that. And then Andy, of course, you know, you have a kernel of an idea which is just so, the conceptual idea is just so clean.
Yeah,
and you know exactly
so
what
I like that word.
Clean. It's clean and crisp. And it's just to the point. And that's a napkin, man. You can write it and go right da 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 da. And I think that's where we all meet.
Yeah, you're right, Lee. All of us do like to do that, and I see it in all our work, all your work, writing or visual, or auditory. All of you, I can hear a single idea in it. Maybe that's another reason why we go on and go, I see what you did there. You got straight to the point. Yeah.
It's a difficult thing to, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, it's the alchemy, though, isn't it? That's the sweet spot where everything comes together, and and as you say, particularly a successful film is a miracle. I mean, they say it's a miracle that films get made at all.
I know.
But with all of those people involved, and then something in the middle of it comes together and works beautifully, despite its flaws. And I suppose that's the thing, is that when you do get to the point, because, you know, all of us learning our craft, we've all got to the point where we want to know what's working on, you know, what's happening under the bonnet or under the hood, if you listen in America. Oh, have we got American listeners? Have we got listeners? Anyway, so you study that stuff so much to the point that you do become so analytical. You know, it's the same with music. I'm sure Timo and Lee will agree with me that you can analyze music, and it's the sleight of hand. It's that if you get caught up in that alchemy, in that emotional sweet spot, is you stop analyzing, and that's where the magic happens.
Yes.
Because the worst music for me is the ones where I listen to it and I know exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that's what turns you into a cynic, I think.
Well, I was going to say earlier to Lee, 100%. To Lee, when you were saying, does knowing more about the mechanisms of it after all our lifetime of experience so far, does it ruin it? I've long said that part of what keeps music fresh for me, primarily as a music artist, is still my ignorance. that because I didn't go to music school and I don't know it inside out, part of the energy I have is that when I get sessions back from musicians, I'm still like a kid in a sweet shop, marveling at how they've managed to read the code of the music score and then give me what I had in my head. But like it sounds like real violins. It sounds like, how do they? And I want to stay that sort of ignorant and naive a bit, even in all the sophistication of knowing stuff. That keeps me excited, I think, and that keeps me coming back to music with wonder. Also, Simon, what you were saying, the suggestion you're implying so heavily there is when you get to hear master stems from the master tapes of your favorite tunes, all the individual tracks are so underwhelming, and then there's something about but I can literally hear Bohemian Rhapsody. There's sort of, he stood just behind the cupboard, but when you put it together, it's sort of, oh my word, it's so much more than the sum of its parts. And that, you're right, that is where the joy, the wonder comes back.
And it can sometimes be something very simple, can't it? I can't think of an example, but I'm sure Simon can, where you get a synth pop track or something like that, and it's literally 2 notes, and it's 2 notes done on a melodica or something odd like that. It's just like a what, it's just in the background, it's barely there, but then you go, well, if I took that away, that may not have made number 2 in the charts. It's kind of a really simplistic thing where they must have gone, oh my god, that's brilliant, keep that in.
Not quite the same. There's a fantastic documentary on OMD from 10, 15 years ago, I think. So I think it's all on YouTube anyway, where they go back to the original master tapes and they play back the individual tracks of particularly those kind of 1983 gorgeous OMD, like Made of Orleans and all that, where they go back to the original synth lines and then they remove the reverb and suddenly you've got the crappiest little Casio keyboard sort of sound. Just kind of going beep, 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 beep. Stick a load of reverb on and suddenly it's epic and suddenly it's the most atmospheric, evocative thing you've ever heard in your life.
But that's just an important part of the process, isn't it, Timo?
It is.
It's finding...
It's what gets me making music, is that kind of idea that you can come in as a total sap and with a few boxes. It's just like getting out with an 8mm camera. You can have a go and start playing with the alchemy, and it's just practice, and it's just it's just stuff you do. But knowing that you're hunting for the sweet spot, which is what I'm always hunting for consciously in music, is where it all just straight. That single sort of, it's all in alignment. You know it when you hit sweet spot as a piece of music. I have been obsessing over my favorite Jean-Michel Jarre record. I've gone back to it for the first time in 40 years. I've found myself thumbing it around on the piano, and it's Equinox. And that is like a little magic box. There's something about the way it's built with the matrix sequencer. And I've only recently learned that Equinox Part 7, where you got the bass line down, it's not played by hand. It's Jarre triggering a single note on the matrix sequencer while Michel Guise is changing the pattern. So it's a sort of, it's got this human but automation sound that makes it something else entirely, thanks to Box of Tricks. But every time I go in and listen to more of it, I'm thinking this was done on a 16 track, and that was him getting double the 8 track he had on Oxygen. And 45 years later, it sounds like some sort of code, which is why I loved it in the first place. That is, my goodness. And to watch films and see the same, I know how he's done it, but how has he done it? I think for us as artists, surely it's that magic that hooks us in.
Yeah, the sweet spot. I mean, Andy, you must have many sweet spots in your work. I mean,
and in your cupboard.
The sweet. I mean, you and Timo are absolutely right. The sweet spot, the kernel of an idea that hopefully is that thread that just runs right the way through a story is, I mean, it's key for me, and I think it's key for most films that work. I mean, there are exceptions. There are films that, and I would find them very difficult to make myself, but films that are very much more about maybe characterization and also atmosphere. films that might be more experiential as a film. I mean, they're often films that you follow. They have a strong storyline, they have a strong idea, and that's what carries you through. And then there are other films that are still very big in ideas, but the ideas almost kind of wash over you and just kind of almost like a tide that take you from the start to the end. So a really powerful experiential film would almost certainly be something like 2001, Space Odyssey. I mean, many of us may have read the book, but the film in terms of how it feels is very different. It's not really a storyline that you follow. I think if you go in, and I've seen 2001 a couple of times on the big screen, which is the place to watch it, but I've also seen it many times on the small screen. And if you go in with the mindset that this is a story that I have to watch and follow, and I need to figure out what Moonwatcher is doing, then later on I need to figure out what Dave Bowman and Hal and Frank Paul are all doing, then I think you're not going to get the most out of what Kubrick was trying to do with Clark's story. I think you have to almost just kind of sit back and just let it carry you. And those films are few and far between. Kubrick was an artist, really, and I think, very much a one-off. And then there are other films that are very emotional and do carry you, but have a much stronger storyline. So along a similar line of sci-fi, I know it's one of your favorite films, Timo, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
It's number one in a way for me in terms of classic movies. I think it's number one.
And I think that story is very, very similar. It could be a companion piece to 2001 because it's both. They're both about humans, both ape creatures and our more evolved selves later on, both coming into contact with alien intelligence. And that's exactly what happens in Close Encounters as well. But with Close Encounters, it's more, rather than sort of feeling it and kind of intellectualizing it, I heard it described once as alien encounter as a spiritual experience. So for Roy Neary, Richard Dreyfuss's character, basically it is a spiritual experience. He has an experience on the road when he is he gets hit by this bright light, and then for the rest of the film he's trying to make sense of that. And it's only at the very end that the pieces kind of come together, and he has a kind of an epiphany, really. So that's a film that you can think, I mean, it's got a very strong storyline. Dreyfuss's character has an encounter, and then there's all these steps where he's trying to follow these lights in the night sky, trying to work out what's going on. He has this vision of what turns out to be Devil's Tower, and he's going step by step to this place where he will encounter the aliens properly.
This first number is a longitude.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
it be great if they'd have all turned up? If they'd have all turned up at the mountain and it was actually made of lots of mashed potato.
The homemade version.
Bring your forks.
All the aliens, they're just eating it.
Yeah. It could have been the robots from the Smash adverts, really, couldn't it? They'd be perfect.
This feels like a goodies episode that didn't.
The ramp lowers, and it's for mash get smash.
Actually, the goodies did do a version of Close Encounters, didn't they? Where they have trombones sticking out the window at the bottom of the spaceship. I've got one memory in my head.
I'm sure they did that. Perfect. So that's the perfect fusion. It's emotional and experiential, but it's also quite logical as well. You've got a storyline, a very strong storyline to follow. Strong idea.
Well, I've got a question then. I love the lovely story retold, not a retread, but sort of doubled up in its power by Spielberg telling the story of his way into film in film. And what happens is, of course, a legend is born, and he takes the little train set and he makes it into a thing, and he makes it into a film, and then he's out and smash cut to Close Encounters. Not 1944, whatever that film, 45, whatever that film was. But I am thinking of how, for most of us as artists, doesn't come out like Spielberg. So we'll go to the cinema and think, oh, I can make film now. Yes, I'm an auteur. I have things to say. I should think through the edit and the sound as well. I should do everything, and I should change the world, and people will chase after my coattails. And then most films. Why are most films not incredibly naff? And what is the weird anti-magic that makes a fan film? Oh, bless a fan film when it does.
Pat him on the head.
If you look at both George Lucas's and Steven Spielberg's kind of early stuff, so you got THX 118, which was a
1138. Got to get the numbers right.
I've got to get the numbers right. I'm a film
room full of nerds, Lee. Room full of nerds. You won't get away with it.
You won't get away with that, mate.
Look, we'll only get our listener complaining that we didn't know the name of George Lucas's film.
It's right there.
Your mum will. Next time you see your mum, she'll say it was THX 1138.
Yes, 1941.
Not 1944.
Thank you. I can't remember.
I stayed up all night.
Thinking about that, which number did he miss? So all the way through that college or university film, it's just a concept. There's lots of ideas, and it's a brilliant concept. It's very, very simple, and he made it on the budget that he had with the equipment that he had. Dark Star, very similar. John Carpenter, they did what they could do with the budget that they had. And Steven Spielberg, Duel, which is a TV film, and he said, well, how can we make this cheap? Oh, I know, we'll just strap a camera to the front of the car. They just sellotape the thing on there.
It's the best movie making there is. Strap a camera to a car.
But he learned very quickly, didn't he, that he didn't need a lot of paid people in the film to worry about. It was the objects that had the threat. So when you look at Jurassic Park, yes, the dinosaurs are scary, but one of the scariest scenes is that car falling through the tree, and the timing of it. He's really brilliant at bringing inanimate objects. And I think, they were early on in their craft, both of them. They both had visions and ideas and thoughts. And you can see how Star Wars came about, and that in itself famously looked like a schlocky film until it all got in the edit with John Williams' music. And then, so we can make these films. You just have to know your limits. So, Andy, you know your limits, which is why your films are so good, because you go, I can't actually do a drone shot because I don't have a drone. I can't do this shot, but what's the point of me trying to reenact that in my head? It's not going to work. Let's pare it down, make it simple, make it a nice gliding shot. That will work. And it's more powerful because you have to create more and you're within your limitations.
I jump in there and say is that the single idea will keep telling you what to do, and so will the limitations, and they can save you. It's about that Star Trek adage of turning a disadvantage into an advantage. What I always think as a music producer is, how can I make this sound like this was my first choice? And that's true for any production. Once you get past the art and the self-expression and the emotional truth that you play into writing something with testimony, then when you get into the professional nuts and bolts of production and realizing it, literally making it real, then you need tricks and practice and help. And that's why we say, the young ingenue music artists who make classic records, somewhere in there will be an old guy who helped record it right. And all of us need an old guy with a cigarette who goes, you've mic'd that all wrong, bugger off to lunch and I'll fix it again.
Well, this is it. When you listen to, say, some of the early Beatles albums, or some albums from the 40s and 50s, where they've got, for some reason, the magic was there, and the sound is crisp and it's beautiful and it's clean, and we're going back to the recordings and making them cleaner. Then you look at Jimi Hendrix, and they didn't know what to do with him, and it sounds muffled and terrible. Yet that was 10 years, 20 years of good recording equipment that was out. So how could they mess up? How could the person? It's the guy with the fag who's probably asleep on acid at that point. And it's like, let's just put it all flat. You can do it in the studio.
Yeah,
and that's it.
But I guess the difference is, with somebody like Jimi Hendrix, it didn't really matter that much if he was recorded really badly, because the guy was, insanely talented at what he did. So,
Mattered
I
to me.
mean, well, yes.
It wasn't clear enough, Andy.
but this is the thing, isn't it? With film, it can be about technical ability, and we were talking about Villeneuve earlier on, and how obviously he's got huge budget at his disposal now, and it looks incredible. But then you've got again, Simon and myself saw this British film, All of Us Strangers, with Andrew Scott a couple of months back, and it's clearly a low-budget British film. I suspect if Andrew Scott wasn't such a known actor, and whatever his fee is these days, it would be a film that would probably be well under £1 million to make. Relatively small cast, relatively straightforward locations and everything, and yet incredibly emotional, really involving story about a man who's kind of emotionally closed off, really, and then through in his mind revisiting his childhood and his parents, suddenly or slowly learns how to reconnect with another person in his life, but also I guess the world as well. And I think technically, I mean, it's not like they didn't know how to pull focus and to expose a shot properly, but it certainly wasn't about the technique. And there are some films where, even if the technique is poor, the strength of the idea or the characterizations or the power of the portrayals, which I think is what's happening in this case, the performances of the actors, power through any level of, sort of technical inability. Not to say that this film is technically poor, but it's not about technique. That's sitting quite far back in what this particular film is doing, and it's all about characterization and emotion and performance and feeling.
Probably feels like a blessed relief compared with CG overload in the main cinemas. What did you make of it, Simon?
Yeah, I thought it was breathtaking, if I'm honest. It's also about choices, and it's about, I suppose, taste to an extent. I mean, I was thinking about, Andy's the guy to talk about it, but the power of editing. To go back to, Lee was mentioning Star Wars briefly with was it Marshall Lucas who came in with and did that final edit on Star Wars that pulled it all together and made it work? Was it?
Can't remember.
I'm trying to remember.
It was. There was
might have been.
Famous edit, wasn't there? Yes, that did make that.
Yeah, apologies if I've named the wrong editor there. But yes, she came in and pulled the whole thing together, and it's all about, how long the camera should rest upon one particular scene and when it moves on, and it's amazing how we are all subconsciously aware of it. Timo, you were saying about where you'll watch a fan film and suddenly you're very much aware it's a fan film, and a lot of the time it is literally just where that scene cuts off,
the
or when
beat,
it moves to the next one. And with All of Us Strangers, but also with Star Wars and with so many films, the choice of music as well. Music is another character in All of Us Strangers.
Really, that's always my favorite. I always love it when music is very conspicuous.
Yes. Yeah, it absolutely is. And why it didn't get any Oscars, I don't know. Yeah. So it is a beautiful film, beautifully acted, beautifully shot. But you're absolutely right. The subtlety of it, Andy, was something in itself as well, wasn't it? And pacing and allowing the audience to go on the journey at the pace that you want them to. So they're not, getting it right. So they're not getting bored. They're getting just enough information to pull them through. Just like with a novel, just like where you drip feed information to get them turning the page, and that's exactly the same experience.
It was quite happy to take its time, wasn't it, in terms of its pacing?
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether there's a new wave of slower films coming out, because The Holdover is another interesting, kind of not big wham bam thank you man type of film. You've got the one about the German film that's just come out. I can't remember what it's called.
The Zone of Interest.
Zone of Interest. That's powerful. And also Anatomy of a Fall, which I saw and really enjoyed. I didn't know I was going to see it. It was part of an unseen screen thing at Odeon, and they just put it on. I went, oh, okay, let's see what this is about before the Oscars. And I came away really thinking about it. It's just a very, very clever, simple concept. Somebody dies falling out of a window, and then you've got a group of characters. And it's about language. It's about the way language works. It's about belief, confidence, and not being confident as well. There's a kid in it. There's a dog in it. And looking at things from different angles. It's mostly a courtroom scene and looking back at stuff that's happened in about 5-10 minutes of the original part of the film. It's really clever, really easy to watch, and incredibly powerful. I think there was silence in the cinema after that, and I love it when that happens. I love it when the things that, no one's moving out their seat; they're all thinking about it and thinking,
Oh, wow.
that was a great film." So
what's been everyone's most emotional experience in the cinema then, when you've been left really, films that resonate when you walk out? I've got a couple of embarrassing ones, but I've also got less so. But I mean, what experiences have knocked you for six in the cinema?
Well, Watership Down was pretty hard. mainly because when I was, whatever it was, 11, I watched it. I didn't realise it's the first time I ever saw proper death on screen, and it was bunny rabbits, bleeding with barbed wire at their necks and stuff, horrible. And then, of course, my granddad was supposed to pick us up. Obviously didn't. I worked out where he was, probably in the pub, and then left us there for the next showing. So I had to watch it twice. It scarred me a lot. It's not my favourite film.
Never listen to Simon and Garfunkel ever again.
So that was emotional, because the song, every time that comes on, it brings a tear to my eye. But anyway.
God.
Well, yeah, Dead Rabbits.
Anyway, off you go. Your turn.
Right. How do you follow up that? Dead Rabbits. I went by myself. I saw 12 Years a Slave.
Oh, mate. You went alone?
And you were probably just as well, because I walked back from our local Odeon, just a 20-minute walk back to my house, just weeping. It's a film I probably won't be able to ever watch again. It was just not because it's a bad film, but obviously because it's searingly hard to watch. So that was just a really difficult watch for me personally. I'm not sure. I'm sure it would be a hard watch for a lot of other people as well, but that particularly affected me.
Well, interestingly, the last thing that really knocked me for six in the cinema, I think it's the only time I've fully wept, and it doesn't sound all that. I don't know why it got to me, but it was. Mate, it was the tension between the not subtle subtext and the way that they, in the end, had to take the coin, and Ken's the real hero. Anyway, it was Dunkirk. I don't know what got to me about it, but because it's another Arch movie, so I love the brains behind all his films, but I'm not.
It is an Arch movie.
But
you went down too much. It's a very important subject with a very tense, piece of music underneath as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's something about whether I'd have that again. I don't know. I'm not into the war and the nostalgia. Quite the opposite, in fact. But there was something about it. I went with my mum and my sister, and we were all there, and I was just in bits for a while afterwards. So that was probably my last. But I have also felt, not to tears, but two films in the 90s that did resonate for days afterwards. I'm going to say it because it'd be funny. Titanic and Braveheart. Both of them at the time really hit me for six. And I think it's because my brain was going, this happened. So I suspended disbelief a long way with those two. I mean, way past what's his mate, the hair, the flipping hair, the accent, the everything. So much about it.
Yeah.
I've seen it since and just I couldn't get through it. It was like, oh, this is appalling. But
it's the story, right? It's the story of
it's the history. I think added this whole layer in my imagination. That they're showing things that happened, and so they did both resonate for a while
Just
afterwards.
before we go to Simon, that's a very important point. Actually, there was a kind of a watershed moment for me too. It's Christmas Day. It's when The Pianist was shown on Christmas Day. Why would you show that film on Christmas Day? Anyway, I watched it and I thought, oh, what a beautiful film. Halfway through, someone gets shot, and they get shot in the head, and it's the whole thing. The frame's there, bang. There's a famous horrible photo of somebody just about to get a bullet in their head. It's terrifying anyway. And they did it on this. It took me away, and I was on my own in the room watching it while everybody else was doing something, and I started crying. And I was like, oh my God, I don't cry that often, if ever, really.
No,
and I started crying. I thought, this is awful, because it happened, and I know how terrifying the Holocaust was, but it actually happened. And then after that, loads and loads of films started coming out with pretty much gratuitous gun shooting scenes in people's faces, everything from John Wick and all that stuff. But way before that, it was starting to get much more violent and more acceptable, and I feel desensitized to it, and that's a direct result of directors and artistic people making a choice to show as much as possible. And I don't know whether that's a particularly brilliant or healthy thing. I think my original emotion is how you should be feeling when you see a scene like that. Anyway, Simon, something happy, right?
But it's funny because I was relieved when Timo mentioned Titanic, because I just wanted to make the point that I feel deeply shallow, because I was thinking desperately trying to think of some really thick and meaningful and beautifully directed film. I mean, but they are, when you think of it, it's important that these accessible films like Titanic, and I was going to say Saving Private Ryan as well. I remember that being hugely affecting that first 10 minutes. Those films are watched by as many people as possible. We can be as snobby as we like with these things, and think, oh yeah, every war film's got to be hugely realistic and impenetrable, maybe, I don't know. But when you get as many people seeing Titanic as saw Titanic, and yes, factually it took some liberties. Is probably an understatement, but as you say, the what you walked away with was this idea that, my God, this actually happened.
Yeah.
And it didn't pull its punches when it was important. It didn't pull its punches.
There's a beautiful shot towards the end of Titanic when there's an elderly couple. They're lying on top of their bed in one of the cabins, and the water has come up to the level of the bed, and they're just holding each other.
Yeah.
And that always stuck in my mind as a very affecting moment, and I'm sure that did happen, and there were couples like that.
I think it's based on they found something, but
so within a very commercial, very successful film from an action director was a very moving moment. I mean, Cameron's actually a very good filmmaker.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, The Abyss is wonderful. Terminator 2 just one of the best movies of its kind. It's one of those sort of basically perfect films, and it's the art of the great pop tune. It takes a lot of skill, more arguably, to make a joyful. I always say it's harder to make a joyful, perfect pop tune than it is to make something miserable.
Yes,
Is
it harder to make Superman the movie than it is to make The Dark Knight?
Yes.
There's a question.
Yeah. Superman
I love Superman.
Yeah, it's magical. It's magical.
And John Williams, for God's sakes.
Yeah, amazing.
For goodness sakes, yes.
Can't go wrong.
One of those. I was going to say one of those details that can give away a film as being not quite up to snuff, I think, is use of sound. And if you are on a total student's budget, then making the sound pop is like wearing a really sharp pair of shoes with an average suit. I've always seen it that way. Buy a cheap suit but get it tailored in around the waist, and then buy a decent pair of shoes, and you'll look more expensive than you are. And that's sort of the way I always think of film. Get the sound to really pop, and your movie will seem steps ahead of itself.
I utterly agree with that, because I remember being involved with lots of kind of films and things when I was growing up, and I didn't put sound in because I knew I could never get it right. And if you did, then you've got to have a really good mic, nice close up, or you do a head, you do a headshot kind of talking heads type thing. You can get away with it if you've got a microphone lapel mic or something like that. But when you try doing, like I say, work within your limits. If you try doing anything else and you have a fluffy mic hanging out here and you don't really know how it's going to come out, it often sounds pretty pants. I mean, narration is good. Go post-production stuff is brilliant. It all sounds really lovely. But when, if you can get that sound absolutely spot on, you can almost forgive a film being relatively crappy in other places, because it just sounds so amazing. I had to look at around about 50 short films by students when I was helping a friend who's marking them, and it was painful, really, and not one of them understood how to use sound in any shape or form. Okay, they were 17 and 18, but you'd expect one person to go, actually, do you know what I might do is do something a bit different and get close to the mic, or not have it in, or do a silent film. It's tough. I think that's really, really hard. You're right, Timo.
There is one of my favorite podcasts, which is sort of toweringly clever and silly all at the same time. It's called Some More News, and it's a news-looking format. And Cody Johnson, who presents it, I think they have a little team of writers, but it's satirical and cuttingly brilliant. It's in the spirit of The Daily Show, but it's a podcast and they have no budget. And their take on the world's events is beautifully researched and insanely sort of how to turn the most serious things into a funny presentation. It's a sort of masterclass, don't tell them. But they did actually one episode worth seeing, which I didn't think I was going to want to sit through. And they did a sort of two-parter about why films with media with agenda makes bad media. So right-wing activists in America want to reclaim Hollywood and it's like Christian films. You can smell when you're watching a Christian film that's got a message. You can always tell because it's so expositional. And they do, in the second episode, Some More News does a takedown of this right-wing film, and I can call it that because they proclaim that they want to make movies for the Trump audience that isn't part of the liberal elite. So they do a terrible film. I almost don't want to say what it is, but I will, so you can watch the right episode, called Lady Ballers. And it's an anti-trans film that's meant to be like a sort of comedy hangover movie about a bunch of guys who don't qualify for a baseball team, and then they pretend to be women and get into a league. But the reason I mention all this is because Some More News does an absolute masterclass in breaking down why it is this truly terrible piece of work. It's not simply that the values stink. It's that the intention to try and do a preachy movie with terrible values actually just exposes from top to bottom, nuts and bolts, utterly terrible piece of filmmaking. And I almost sort of want to show that episode to film students and say, take note of everything here. Now go make a film. It was, I recommend that. Some More News looking at Lady Ballers. It'll teach you how to make a film by how not to make a film. It's everything about, breaking the fourth wall, not the fourth wall, but the line, they cross the line. They do all the weird, basic nuts and bolts of lighting and performance and where the camera goes and script and sense within the script and character motivation. Absolutely everything is terrible, utterly risibly bad. And the reason that Some More News did it is because the two guys in the media, it's like a media thing in America, trying to get more more well known. They said, "Hey, we're happy for people to artistically criticize our work. People who don't like it, let's hear what you've got to say." So these guys went, "Right, hold mankind. Here's all the ways you are terrible people." It's wonderful.
That's our homework.
It's homework.
Kind of like that character. I've brought them up before. The character in Good Morning Vietnam. You know, the guy who takes over from Robin Williams at the end, and he's harassing him all the way and saying, "This is terrible. I can do it better," and all this sort of thing.
Yes.
And he comes on and does Frenchie or whatever this character is.
Yes.
And you're just squirming, and he has no clue. He's like these people on the X Factor who have no clue that they just don't get it. They just don't get it.
Well, what is the
Can't
secret
see
sauce then?
themselves.
What makes a film? Can we? I'm going to ask the impossible question. What makes a film come together? What is the secret bit that you must have that will make it work?
It's so hard, because you imagine all those. Because the other miraculous thing about cinema is because you've got all those people involved. I mean, it's almost bad films are as fascinating as amazing films.
Yeah.
In as much as you turn around and say, "Well, why didn't somebody turn around and say this isn't working?"
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people think that about, you know, the Star Wars prequels. They think about, you know, next month is the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace, and I've still got a lot of attachment to that film in a funny way, because, you know, well, anyway, I won't go into that now, but equally I can see where you know, you look at it and you say that isn't working, and nobody turned around to George Lucas and said, "Yeah, do you think there's another way?" But, you know, is that
who is going to turn around to George Lucas at that stage? You know, the director of Star Wars and producer of all the other films, and say something to him? They're not, are they? Because his bank account says that he knows best.
Yeah. But you know, we're talking about a project as big as like Mount Rushmore, and it's like somebody accidentally knocked off the nose of one of the presidents. You know, it's that level of where things go wrong.
I think there's. I was going to say, I think there's a lot of self-denial that is almost required to make a film. I mean, you're in a bubble anyway. Making a film, you're not really getting kind of feedback from outside of the circle that are making the film very often, unless you're doing a big studio film, in which case, you know, studio heads will have a lot of micromanaging memos and notes, maybe on a daily basis, but otherwise you're making these films, and, you know, as I've said many times, nobody sets out to make a bad film. Everybody sets out to make the best film that they can.
Yeah. And
as you said earlier on, Simon, it is alchemy.
Yeah.
I mean, filmmaking really is alchemy. If there was a cast iron 100% formula for making a good film every single time, then every film would be a great film. And it's not, because the constituent parts that sometimes come together to make a great film just won't mix that second time around. So, you know, you go from, you know, turning lead base metals into gold, and the next time it's a lump of poo, and you might even have the same elements. Good example, he's a fantastic director, so this isn't meant to put him down, but when Sam Mendes brought all the elements together for Skyfall, you've got one of the best recent Bond films in years. That same group of people then came together to create Spectre, and for me personally, and I think quite a few other people, it just didn't fire on the amount of cylinders that Skyfall did. So that's alchemy. He had all the same people working for him, all the same elements, but it didn't work. I do think that there is a magical kind of alchemical element to the making of the film that you can't quite pin down, and that's why there's always a certain amount of mystique, but also a certain amount of excitement around a film when it comes out. You know, will it work? Is it going to be as good as the last one? Is it going to be the thing that I want it to be? I find making films that it should get easier with time, because I've got a reservoir of experience and little tips and tricks and things to pull on, and the next film should be incrementally a bit easier than the last one. But I feel the converse. Actually, I find that every new film is like the first film. I feel like I'm starting again. I feel just as scared and all at sea and thinking, how the hell do I do this? As I did when I made my very first film.
But isn't that, I mean, in some ways that's good. And also it's because you are doing a thing that means that all four of us don't get monetized, is that we're always doing things from scratch. We're always doing new things, setting it up and learning it. So every project I do is going, right, if I did that again, I'd know how to do it twice as good in half the time. And you know, and each feature film, every little project has its own language, is teaching you as you make it, right?
I mean, it's rare, isn't it? I suppose theatre is one of the things you can improve on, and because you have to repeat the same thing over and over and over again.
Physical practice,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the kind of practicing and things like that. But with filmmaking, you're going to have a different element somewhere. You've got to put trust in people. You know, you have to respect each other, and you have to hope that, say, if there's a producer, they're going to get a gaggle of people together. You know, you gave me a casting director credit for getting a whole bunch of people on set. He said, "Lee, can you sort this out?" I went and did it. So you have to have extreme trust in someone else to do the right thing. And, you know, if you think how big films are, Simon, you mentioned the amount of people that are in a film, you have to trust the second unit. You have to trust that person to get the right tone to bring it all together. Otherwise, you've wasted a lot of money. Yeah, Lord of the Rings, good example. You'll have a tone set in a forest or whatever, and you have a second unit over on a glacier somewhere, and it has to still have that same feeling of Lord of the Rings world, but they're two utterly different places with different bits of action, personalities, characters happening, different people filming, different lighting people, but it all has to look the same. So, you know, there's got to be massive trust. There's a lot, obviously, Andy, of planning as well within each of its life to get it right, especially if you're playing with other people's money.
But again,
money helps.
I think here in my head of the difference between the term director, which immediately makes us think of movies, and creative director, which is from advertising. They're the same job, essentially, because a creative director sounds, well, it's got the word creative in it. But actually, as all my mates who've been creative directors for agencies will say, it's mostly organizing spreadsheets and keeping the staff motivated. And it's almost more like a producer's role, but it's also got the creative heart in the middle. And that's the job of a film director, from my point of view, from having not directly quite done it. It's that you've got to marshal the talent. You've got to pick your team right. You've got to pick the right script. And then you've got to pick people that you know you can trust, because you know that those people you picked will get this story and go, I know exactly what you mean, and bring something extra that you know you couldn't on your own. I think it's so much about picking the team that will get that story and get behind it.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a team who are a group of people whose motivations or ideas are pulling in different directions, it is a recipe for disaster. So it is about the right team, people who are on your wavelength. I think where Christopher Nolan has been very successful at what he's done over the last 20 years is that he makes sure that everybody is on the same page, that there's never a day when he walks onto set where someone is surprised at the direction something is going in, because he's been at great pains to say, well, this is the direction we're going in. And
that's how I'd want to do it. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes for a smoother, I'm sure there are hurdles even on his films, but it makes for a smoother production because everyone is pulling in the same direction. So that's key. And obviously the bedrock of that, is trust. Trusted partners that you believe are just going to do an incredible job where you don't have to
Mhm.
micromanage them, that you just, talk to them, give them a briefing. They get where you're coming from. They know the kind of work that you do, and just everything kind of falls in line. And that's where alchemy is then more likely to occur, because all the ingredients are getting stirred in the right way. Everything's moving in the right direction. So that's,
Yeah.
I think that is key.
And if all of what you've just said is then based on a script that is rooted in emotional truth, and the director and the cast get what that emotional truth is, then where characters get room to breathe and room to be in your face, and you can sit with them, and not just have this technically. There's lots of young directors who just keep the camera moving and keep the noise up and all that stuff. They're so basically boring and gets in the way of it all. To have the confidence to let all that breathe, not have any music, all that stuff, as we would say often. Yeah, the emotional truth is the through line. And I use that phrase when I'm talking to clients. I'm talking to, strategists, that unless you're basing what you're building or what you're planning on the emotional truth of those in the community, it's going to fall over. People aren't going to love it. People instinctively love a building like they love a movie, because it is rooted in something genuinely inspired and truthful for where it is. So this is how narrative and movies affect it's one of the ways that movies come out of the way we live in the real world, and then they of course loop back and reflect the way we build the real world, which is why I always say that if you visit the year 3000, we will be flying Falcons and Liberators and X-Wings and and
I hope
Vipers.
so.
We will, because we'll be so used to the idea that that's what the future should look like. When the tech finally gets there, we'll build them. Look at the Cybertruck. That's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a stupid thing. It's sort of really clever and really dumb all at the same time. But it simply embodies the idea that, the future, I want to build the future that I've been shown in the past.
This is why Elon Musk's rockets look exactly like 1950s pulp sci-fi silver spaceships. I think I think he OD'd on sci-fi as a kid, and he's actually engineered his rockets to look just like that. Brilliant. I just wanted to say one thing about, because we have touched upon cinema going and I guess the experience of being in the cinema and going to the cinema, and it'd be terrible if we didn't talk, Lee, about our experience of going to Plymouth to watch Oppenheimer on a giant, and I mean giant, IMAX screen, because again, that had two elements to it. One was we were talking about experiential films that you really experience, and the IMAX format is very much about experiencing something. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe say a bit about our trip to Plymouth last summer to go and see IMAX.
We're all talking about our experiences in a big darkened room with lots of strangers, by the way, and then getting immersed in one film. And I've had experiences on my own looking at films, and I can enjoy it, but I actually kind of quite like other people around me. And we did have an experience. We had an experience in IMAX where there was a bit of noise going on. There's a little bit of, there were some teenagers because they were doing the Barbenheimer thing and all of that. But as soon as it opened, as soon as it started, we're looking at the size of a building, aren't we? And Oppenheimer's audio treats are incredible, and it was going all around us. You're not just in the film, you are the film as well. And I think one of the most impressive things about that film, not only was it huge and it was a really immersive experience, but it was the bravery of the director Nolan to make people's faces in close up, and then saying, we'll put it in IMAX, because really what you're looking at with IMAX, it should be vistas and landscapes, and you get a bit of that, but there's a lot of close-ups. And of course, when you've got Cillian Murphy's incredibly stoic face just looking, you can read everything that's going on in his head through his eyes. You can see that everything on his skin. It's just incredible. You really feel like you're there with him. And we were quite I think what was the feeling at the end, Andy? I think we couldn't quite talk.
Yeah, it was that. I mean, I've heard other people say this. I mean, it's definitely one of those films where when it finishes, it stays with you. And so yeah, I think there was a bit of a pause. We were still just absorbing what we'd seen, and then the sort of hour-long drive back, we were talking about the film and the things and the ideas and the themes that it threw up. I mean, for me, IMAX, I can see why Nolan is such a big proponent and fan of IMAX, because for me, the experience started literally when we entered the actual screen, the cinema itself. So normally you've got that little sort of walkway which is somewhat enclosed, and then you come into the space, and basically I just did this because the screen is just over 60 feet tall.
Where is this? In Plymouth?
Yeah, so this is the Cineworld Cinema. Little plug there. Maybe I'll get some free tickets. The Cineworld Cinema in Plymouth, and I found out later on. I did a bit of research after we'd seen it, because I thought, this is an incredible screen, and is this one of the big ones? And I found out that it's only just, but it's about the third biggest screen in the UK. Wow. There's one in Manchester, and there's one in London that are larger, and and they're only larger by a couple of feet in terms of height. So yeah, just over 60 feet high, and then it's obviously wider than it is taller, and it really is. There are no bad seats really in an IMAX theatre. The slope of the seats means that the person in front of you would have to be about 15 feet tall for their head to be blocking your view. So the seating angles are great. And I think we were somewhere in the middle, and so there were people behind us who were much higher up, and then there were people below us, and a nice spacing, really nice wide spacing between seats. So you didn't feel you were surrounded by people, but you didn't feel really sort of hemmed in. And so just that sense of a screen that is literally cutting into your peripheral vision. So when the images first came up onto the screen, we saw some trailers beforehand. Literally to your right and left, if you didn't move your head, the edges of the frame were just into that blurry edge of yours, almost 180-degree vision. And then, as Lee said, once the film started, rather than these vistas, you've got a lot of close-ups, a lot of details. It's a way to actually make something very intimate, rather than just to be grand landscape. There was some of that, but you do get to see almost Oppenheimer's thought process as he's figuring stuff out, or later on he's in turmoil over what he's done.
Simon, have you seen it as well or not? No, I haven't either. Yeah,
no, I'm not sure whether I will. Subject matter, I find really uncomfortable.
Do you?
Yeah, it's not like Threads, that terrifying UK thing. And the bomb part of it is quite a small part of the film. I think everybody was waiting for, it's in the IMAX, we're going to see the big bomb thing. That is so cleverly done. You barely see any of it, and it's all about the feeling of it. And it's that I don't think there's any horror. There's no horror in it, but the horror is within the characters and the character. And there's there's an hour. It's about 3 hours long. There's an hour at the end where it's almost like a mock-up courtroom scene where some men in black are trying to do him over, and it's absolutely you're gripped from start to finish. I think it's a film that you'll probably enjoy more than you think you're going to enjoy, actually. So I would recommend it. It's not as
wonderful
terrifying
soundtrack.
as you think it is.
Wonderful soundtrack as well, isn't it? I've heard Nick Chaclain's played the piece where they turn the bomb on, and it's wonderful score, electronic score. Is it Zimmer again?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Just
But
on-
No, it's not. It's not Zimmer.
Oh,
it's
it's-
it's Goran. I forgot
yes,
this.
no,
I
Goran.
forgot his
Yeah,
name.
what else
Yeah.
has he done? Because
Doing
he
some
did.
lovely work.
Apologies for not knowing his full name, but yeah, I mean it's a masterful piece of music. Yeah.
Well, we had a remarkable cinema experience totally by accident when in Amsterdam a month ago, because we wanted to see Poor Things. I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't know what to expect and what the setup was. But we also went to see it very accidentally in the Tuschinski Theatre. Andy, do you know about that? It's a cinema in Amsterdam.
I don't know about the Tuschinski Theatre. No, sorry, no.
So it's like going to see a movie in Batman. It's a sort of neo. Well, it's not neo. It actually is Art Deco. I was going to say neo Art Deco, heavily Art Deco cinema, which they've kept in perfect order. Every last nut and bolt on the door handles is designed in a deco style, so it's like walking onto a film set. It's the ultimate sort of love affair for theatre's golden age, really. You think, I'm going to have to watch King Kong in this cinema. So then sitting there where we're staring at everything in the whole theatre, sitting down going, where have we come? Where have we been teleported into? And then to watch Poor Things in
that's
that
perfect.
setting was kind of mind-blowing. We reeled out of there going, what has just happened to our minds? It was wonderful. But that was a good experience in the total. It was immersive, sort of by accident, by two wonderful things coming together, which just reminded me what cinema can be like, that it can be a total lose yourself event, which I think good films should be, because they've so much effort and money goes into making any film at all. You know, you want them to have proper conviction. But anyway,
it's a wonder that anyone makes mistakes in movies because of the amount of money. But
yes,
and that it's got to be counterproductive, allowing that to control your actions. Because I wanted to say about how important, how much I appreciate mistakes being made. But if you can detect the spirit with which a film is made, then I don't have such a problem. You know, if you can see, well, I can see what they were trying to do. And there's a big feeling of, well, because we're all such big movie buffs and there's so many of us and we watch so many movies on TV and what have you, that we come out of it thinking, well, we think of what things should be as opposed to what they could be and what we allow them to be. Because, you know, as in music, as in film, as in books, as in any creative medium, and particularly with art, allowing yourself to make those mistakes to learn is hugely important. I mean, a lot of my favorite films are flawed films. As I mentioned, Phantom Menace is not one of my favorite films, but I don't dislike it. Hugely flawed for all the reasons that everyone said. And my mate and I on a previous podcast I was on, I always make the ongoing joke that I love my 8 out of 10 episodes and films. The 8 out of 10 films are the ones you love, whereas the perfect ones are the ones that you aspire to and you respect and you think, oh yeah, I'll stick that on the shelf and say, yeah, that's the most amazing film I've ever seen. But it's the 8 out of 10 ones that you keep coming back to
and watching. That is perfection, Simon. Yes, you're bang on. Same with music. Again, same with music albums.
Yes,
it's important creatively as well to allow that space of not just mistakes but failure. As well. I think that's the really important thing. The idea to just have that space to let something go wrong, and not that you would want a film or any creative project to go off the rails, but unless you're able to allow for that possibility, then you're not really going to risk anything. So I think that's the real issue, not being able to shoot for the moon and fall short, basically.
And that's where actually making art at our sort of level is still the most passionate, where you're working with very little and that now all the things it could be, but also you might have some tricks about how to do something, whether it's just a short film or a piece of music. I think we can still get geeky, nerdy, passionate about things as we were when teenagers, but now knowing a lot more, which I think is just utterly wonderful. And that's that's the energy I want to see in all films, where they clearly the person making it is still hungry, and I want to be hungry until I fall over. And I think in that a little bit of plenty of imperfection and a little bit of ignorance might be part of the grit, a bit like Villeneuve shooting on digital, transferring it all to film, and then transferring that back to digital to make some extra something in the quality.
Yeah,
I think a little bit of ignorance it helps me do fun work.
Absolutely. Along those lines, I was just going to say, because this was something we talked about in our threads elsewhere, the idea of making mistakes, but we're now on the cusp of having films made by software that doesn't make mistakes.
We haven't gone there. It's like a whole another episode now, isn't it, to start talking about that. But quickly, what we going to say?
I was just going to say the whole Sora AI. So for those who don't know, a little bit like is it Chat GPT, that there is this software now where you can type in a line of text describing a scene from a film that you would like to see, and then this software will then serve it up to you in 1-minute clips at the moment, in incredible photorealistic detail. And obviously the internet has gone a little bit mad about this. YouTubers are thinking, am I out of work, and will the film industry be decimated by this? It is something that I suspect we will come to again in other episodes and talk about, because it's going to affect so many other things. But it might just be interesting just to touch on it now, in that what will this change for filmmakers? I mean, we've already got writing programs where people can do essays, and these essays can be almost indistinguishable from a human written one. And now we're getting into that area where films themselves might be affected.
Yeah.
And will we want to consume them? Will they have the kind of the patina, the textures of human fingerprints, where things do sometimes go wrong, or they're a bit quirky, or they're a bit odd?
I mean, obviously fingers is the first thing I'll say. Things go wrong.
They're not very good at fingers,
and there are some very odd things going on with legs.
Yes.
In those clips that I've seen, where one rotating legs as somebody's walking.
Yes,
it's quite amazing, which was fascinating in itself.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I've got a mate of mine, Eric Drass, is sort of a bit of an expert on this, but on the thread I'm on with him, he's always posting dark, weird stuff that he is testing out and trying to get to work, and I find it all very disturbing. But I think in a way this is a whole episode to talk about automation and creativity. There's so much to go into there, and in a way, by starting with our more that we all hate the word nostalgia, but by looking back to what inspired our roots of storytelling in filmmaking in particular, I think it's teeing us up for a really great episode where we start with the Sora and have a discussion about what we really think about these tools. There's a lot in us, I know, to talk about that. What do you guys think?
Definitely.
Yeah,
I think
you've just said.
Yeah, good. And welcome back, Lee. It was the best bit of the show, to be honest, mate. Don't worry about it, but we did just do the best bit.
We were talking about mistakes and failures, and you disappeared. So all in all, that was perfect.
It's perfectly timed. I'd like to thank my agent and.
Did you just go off and make an Oscar-winning film while in 5 minutes?
Yeah,
that was a good tea break.
No, I tripped over a cable. And turned my computer off. How good is that?
Well, we were just talking about making room for mistakes. And I
Yeah.
think on sets, tripping over the main cable that kills the whole set would count.
Lee will be the first to be
Oh,
replaced
dear.
by AI.
How would you program that? How would anybody actually program an AI Lee? I can't see that myself.
Does not
This is the AI
compute.
Lee. I've
You're not
already
really
killed a
there.
Lee. This is his, I'm the robot copy.
You know
Okay.
what?
Can
You know what?
see?
I always preferred you. Yeah, I
know.
didn't
It's
like
just-
the real one.
It's the shiny skin, isn't it?
It's your uncanny valley, mate.
How many fingers?
Look, we've got a problem with fingers in the uncanny valley. I think we really we need to pull out of this now.
Okay, pull out of the uncanny valley.
Because we've shot our golden whatever it was. So
Goose.
I'm sort of feeling that maybe we need to give our dear listener a break after an hour and a half of us just chatting without editorial structure. But I feel like we've opened the way to our next episode, which might happen this side of the summer.
Should do.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I don't know why I'm thanking you. We can all. I'm going to thank us all. Somebody else thank us as well. Thank you.
Well,
Lee and
thank you,
Simon
Timo.
and Andy.
Thank you, us.
I'd
God
like to
bless
thank
you,
my
one and all.
agent and my agent
I didn't-
and
I've had this sat next to me the whole time. The film posters. Did one of you buy me this? I can't remember now whether you did or not. But it's full of
Oh,
golden,
no.
wondrous things.
I should have.
Because it's where graphic design meets movies. So it's actually a lovely four.
haven't really
Yeah.
spoken about that side of it. Wow.
Don't get me started on Drew Struzan.
Okay, well, that's for our next episode then, everybody. Thank you very much, everyone, and we shall go and lie down for a bit and then resume the endless conversation we have, which is marvellous, it's not so much a chat as a state of being.
Nanu.
And now I've got to remember how to drive the assets to get us out of this. I think
And
actually we need to do what we need to do, of course, is the big the grin for this. That's it. So then I can screen grab that and we can get out. Dear listener, thank you for staying with us and chatting about storytelling. Put your comments in the bottom, and we will have a call to action one day. We'll have a thing like a Discord you can join to chat with us crazy goons. At the moment, we can't be asked. It's just a chat. So thanks for joining us. Chat in the thread. See you next time. I assume.
ciao.